Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting here in about 4 minutes. Hello, Kate. Kate, are you on and you're all set? At this point, I can't hear or see you.
Okay. Oh.
There she is. Awesome.
We get it. We're getting good at this,
We
Tony,
know-
or you're getting good at this.
And we are recording and we're all set here.
All right, good. Awesome. Welcome everyone. It's 11:59 cuz we
Okay, reminder we are on YouTube right now. That's up and going.
All right, good.
Folks
Good.
jumping on here.
Awesome. Let's see. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited that you're here as usual, hanging out with us on Wednesday. I'm curious, are there some people that do we have lunch with people? I wonder if people take their lunch break and they get to enjoy their lunch while having a fun culture solution conversation. That's a good way to spend a lunch break. All right, well, welcome everyone. We are so excited that you're here, as always. And I am Kate Volman, the CEO of Floyd Consulting, and of course, always joined by Tony Ferreira, our director of training and awesome executive coach. So we are so excited because, well, just like Tony says, just so you know, we are also streaming this on YouTube. So if you want to go check it out over there, you can. If at any time you have any kind of like issues, challenges, we always say to just refresh first, and that usually takes care of it. But Brooke is going to go ahead and add the link to our YouTube channel if you want to go check out on the YouTube channel. And if you do have any questions throughout the day today, just as usual, be sure to put a question mark, 2 question marks before and a couple question marks after the question, just so we don't miss it. So we're excited that you're here as always. And today we are continuing the conversation around principle number 4, hire with rigorous discipline. And Tony made me do this because he loves this one so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Tony gets fired up when
Fired
you
up.
get him talking about the hiring process.
No legal advice other than
No legal
that.
advice, none. We will leave that to the professionals,
Yes.
but we do have some fun things to share about about hiring. So last week we went through a lot of different things. We got some really great questions. We love all of your questions. Everyone was asking some really great things.
Yep.
And we did talk about some of the hiring mistakes. But today we're going to go over some new things, specifically the hiring process. We do get a lot of questions about the hiring process. Like we said last week, this is what we do. We go into organizations and we help coach leaders through a lot of their challenges, and hiring process is always on top of the list of things that they really need to work on and improve. And so we really love doing work like that. So why don't we kick it off, Tony? We'll kick off just because I know we did talk a little bit last week about some hiring mistakes,
Yep.
because as much as we hate to admit it, we've if you have ever if you are in a position where you've ever hired people, you've most likely made a mistake. So, what
At least.
hiring at least once or twice? What was your biggest hiring mistake? When you think about your past, what was the biggest mistake that you made?
Yep. Go ahead, and I'm interested in summary, and please don't use names. In the chat box, can you let us know your biggest hiring mistake? Or if you're not in charge of hiring, maybe the biggest hiring mistake you've seen in your time as a professional. Okay. Again,
Biggest
if you having trouble, just try to refresh, Vanessa, and we'll see if that works. Of course, you can't hear me, so
Vanessa, if you can hear me, Vanessa, try refreshing the page if you can't hear Tony,
or
and
jump on
that
over to the
that should
YouTube.
work. And then
All right.
also you can also go over to YouTube and click
Yes.
that link, because
Yep.
that's
Well, maybe we don't need to do this today because no one's made a
no
hiring
one's
mistake.
made a hiring mistake.
Here we go.
All right, there.
Hiring out of need, choosing a candidate you know has a red flag, but you think
Oh.
you can manage it. Yes.
Oh, no.
That is the classic, the marriage, I can change him. That's what that is right
Yes.
there.
Yep.
Best in the pool, not waiting for the right one. Very good.
Oh, hiring people because they're friends first.
Yep. That's yeah. Hiring someone that has compliance issues. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Absolutely. We're going to talk about that today. This is great because we are going to, after we get through kind of tying a bow on some of the process, we're going to talk about red flags today. And that'll be good because some of these, maybe some red flags came up as you were doing this. So why don't we, those are great compliance issues. Okay. Maybe, maybe just kind of lead in, we certainly talked a lot last week about the hiring process. And, we were talking about a lot of different things, but I think it's important that if you didn't catch everything that we were talking about last year, at least an outline is actually available in, where's my camera? There we go. In the culture solution. So as if we, right on, as you mentioned to me on page 162 in the culture solution, there's a bit of an outline of a hiring process. And we went into some of the details specifically last week, but we think we're just going to kind of touch on these today. They're right there. They're teed up for you. And so, just I'm going to do a couple, and then Kate, you jump in here at any point. Obviously, you have to have the position and the approval for the position, and that involves both. I'll just say here that that's current hiring, but a company should be looking at what are we going to need, and that should be part of the principle of the plan. When you do your strategic plan for the year, you should have built into that what's the necessary hiring. And then I would also invite folks to say, now, if we wanted to, we did this exercise with a client not too long ago, what do we have to hire, or who do we have to hire? What do positions look like? What's our org chart look like? If we wanted to, 3x revenue, what would we need? And then the opposite, if we had to cut back by 30%, what would it look like? So that's just part of the strategic process, but definitely have to have a position. And then this will look a lot different at a lot of different companies, whether you have an HR department or not. But, that needs assessment with the manager. So what are you looking for? And then of course, the starting point, what are those role descriptions in the scorecard?
Mhm.
So that can be the challenge right there, is that oftentimes we say we need to hire someone and we go right into the hiring process, and we're creating a scorecard while we're interviewing, or we're creating a job description on the fly, or role description rather. So having those things ahead of time, whether you really need that position immediately or not, is a key.
Yeah, it's so important for companies, I think, because so many organizations, when we realize we need more people, right? Like if everyone's overworked and we feel we're understaffed and we need to hire more people, they just it's easy for us to just say we need to hire someone. We've got to
Yep.
get someone else on the team.
Yep.
And so without really thinking through what is that person going to be doing? And going back to last week with the role description and scorecard, like really identifying what is that person going to be taking care of? How are they going to be evaluated so that we know we're actually getting the right person on the team.
Right.
So that's the difference between needing a salesperson, right? Like a
Yep.
sales, a rainmaker, someone that's actually going to go out and produce sales versus a sales manager. Those are two very
Yep.
different roles. And
Absolutely.
that can be really tricky because a lot of organizations, we want someone that can do multiple things. And sometimes it's a little unrealistic. So we've got
Yep.
to get really realistic when it comes to who we need in the organization and how realistic is it for us. I mean, are we going to be able to find someone that can be the rainmaker and run the sales team
Yep.
and produce all the business development activity? Like we've got to
Right.
be really clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you said, you were talking about those role descriptions. The idea that being careful. We're going to talk a minute about external recruiting, internal recruiting. That there's an expression that what got you there won't get you there. That someone who's doing a great job may not be qualified for a new role, but you want to advance them in the organization. Just had that discussion with the CEO the other day, and we talked through the idea that you can recognize and you can advance someone's career without having to put them in another position that they're not qualified for. So, the next logical position for a salesman is to be a sales manager. And we know that a number of really good salesmen are really bad sales managers. And there are some sales managers who are okay salesmen, but they're great at managing people. So definitely, the scorecard, and then certainly, posting that job and starting to source for candidates. So why don't we take that as a kind of a stepping off point? We'll just kind of go through the steps and touch on a couple of things we wanted to talk about sourcing for a moment. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I
Okay.
love that. That makes total
All right.
sense. And I think
So
that's what you just described, Tony. I think that's called it's called, isn't it called the Peter principle?
about somebody in a
About
role where they were good and then they're
yep,
not.
you get to a
Yep.
certain specific level and you keep on.
What is that called? Outlive um, your competence. Sooner or later, you
Yeah, I
will
think
you will
it's
go
called the Peter
past your
principle.
competence.
I
So
don't
you have
know.
to know that point of the people. Yep.
Put in the chat if that's I
Yep.
believe it's called
Right.
Peter. There's something for there's principle that it's everything's called something.
Something is,
There's
yes.
All right, so let's go to sourcing candidates
Sure.
because oh my gosh, I love this topic because there's a really big difference between recruiting and like we've got to be constantly recruiting, right? Like if we're not constantly looking for
Absolutely.
people on a
Yep.
consistent basis even when we don't need them,
Yep.
that's where our
Absolutely.
head needs to be.
I was doing a webinar not too long ago with one of the companies, one of our clients, and asked the question of, this was the executive team, and that was, when was the last time you interviewed for a job you didn't have an opening for? Sounds like a dumb question, but you should be talking to people. You should be, kind of pseudo interviewing people, even when you don't have the position. Then people are ready. Do some work in schools, and schools are notorious for, you hire a teacher when somebody leaves, you get rid of someone, when you have to add a class, whatever that is. But always trying to ask, so how are you sourcing those teachers? And often it's, well, there's a pack of resumes I get from the central office or the diocese or whatever that is. But are you going out? Are you going to colleges and talking to juniors in college? Say, here's who we are. Let me know when you're interested. Are you talking to people, in industry that we'll talk about that in a second. But you're right, Kate. You're always recruiting. And if you are a manager, or if you do any hiring whatsoever, that's just not the CEO's role. If you do any hiring whatsoever, you should always be recruiting. And as a matter of fact, we'll talk about a little bit later here. Even if you are not, you should be doing that. You should be recruiting all the time. And when we get to some hiring bonuses and those things, we'll talk about that. But everybody should be recruiting, and everybody should be sourcing to find those folks. So I'm curious if, while we're talking about this, if anybody could put in the chat, what's your number one source of candidates for positions in your company or industry? It'd be interesting to see your number one source right now. Not what you want it to be, but what's the number one source right now? How do you find people?
Mm,
And really, it's not easy. It's not easy. Now, they did
no.
ask, there was a poll that that was done on some top executives and of some successful companies, word of mouth, excellent. And they asked that question. Now, there was one answer that garnered 77% of of successful CEOs at successful companies. 77% said they rely on their personal or their professional network.
Mhm.
After that, it dropped to around 65% used an external recruiter, and 47% were external researchers. And it's probably just important to touch on that for a minute. An external recruiter is a person that you enter an agreement with to find someone for a job or to find candidates for a job. An external researcher would be Indeed or those things where you're LinkedIn, where they're doing the research to bring you potential candidates. So that's the difference between those two. And that about 47% of the companies, that was their number one. And then only about a quarter of the people had an internal recruiter at their company. So that's just at least some of the research from some top companies. But
Yeah,
the
because
network
those are
really
that's
stands
where
out.
that makes a difference between in really great leaders. They're constantly recruiting, they're noticing they're noticing the skill set of people that are in different roles
Yep.
and just throughout their network, right? Like because people that are actually applying for some of these jobs, sure, like they know they're a sales manager now and they want to be a sales manager in the future, but there's like very specific things that like if we start to research and analyze what makes a great sales manager
Yep.
or what makes a great HR director, we might be able to find these people that are in this a similar type role,
Yep.
but we're able to take them and really help them in
Yep.
within our organization
Sure.
and with what our role description is,
Yep.
just because we notice that skill
Yep.
set. Because I know we talked about it last week, and some people actually made the point that you can't you can train someone to do a job, but you can't. There's a lot of skills that people have that the soft skills that you can't train someone. You can't
Yep.
train someone about culture, about empathy,
Yep.
about whatever your core values are. So when we're kind of out and about and we're seeing really talented people out in the world, there's just some people that I look at and I think, man, I would love to hire them. I don't know what I would hire them to do yet, but they are just
Absolutely.
they're
Sure.
passionate, they're
Yep.
excited, they're a hard worker,
Right.
they like believe in their work. They are just every position they've ever been in, they like
Yep.
they take like charge of, and I'm like, I want that person on my team
Yep.
one day. I don't know how, but
Right,
it'll
and that's a
happen.
great point because there's finding that right person and then making sure that you have the role for them. Because another danger is, like you say, this person's great and there's no skill set that they have that matches up to what you need. It's a not now for them, but a someday, and keeping them in mind. One quick story about recruiting, and I'm going to answer a question that John put up here, about always recruiting. Mark Cuban, who owns the Dallas Mavericks, very
Yep.
interesting. There, when he took over the team, he invested a ton of money in the visitors' locker room. Like, what are you doing? Why? I mean, it was a Taj Mahal. And why are you doing that? And because, opposing players would come in and go, oh my gosh, this visiting locker room is. And his answer was, look, the average tenure for a player on a team is like 2.4 years or 3 years in the NBA. When a player reaches free agency, what do I want going through that guy's mind? Man, they do things well in Dallas. I remember, and that's the visitors' locker room. I can't even imagine what it would be like to work there. So that was a way of recruiting all the time. When you can tell your story or show your story about what it means to be at your company, you're recruiting. So whether that's speaking to a group or whatever that might be, you're always recruiting. Now the question comes up, who's got time to do that? Well, people are your most important resource, so you better find the time to do it. But here's a 10-week challenge if someone wants to, if you're a leader, and it's super simple. So when you get done today, make a list of the 10 most talented people regardless of industry. The 10, this kind of piggybacks on what you're saying, Kate. Make a list of the 10 most talented people and then commit to talking to just one of those people one time a week for the next 10 weeks. Have a conversation. It might be lunch or it could just be a phone call, but have a conversation with that person. Two things can happen. One, and this has actually happened to me, where you start talking, saying, look, you're doing things really well there. I'm just curious, who are some of the top people that are out there? Don't worry about that are looking for a job, that might be interested in a job. Can you tell me those people? Who would they be? Now, the best reference you get from somebody is a CEO or a manager saying, well, you could try so-and-so, but you'll never get him. That's the person you want to try to get. But I'd like to talk to some people, and the conversation can be really simple with those people. Look, I got reference from John. If I'm writing an email or a phone call with this list that they give me, and I say, hey, Mary, listen, I want you to know I had lunch with John the other day. He mentioned what a great job you were doing. And we are really always looking for people on our team. And I think there's a particular skill set that you might be perfect for at our company. And if you're not interested, do you know some folks who might be? That's how you increase that network. It's one call, one time a week for 10 weeks. Now, if everybody gives you one person, that's 10 candidates that you have to start with. Now, if every one of those people give you 10, you get to 100 real quick. So that's definitely a point of just find talented people and talk to them one time a week for the next 10 weeks. Your network will explode, and it's certainly a great way to do that.
And Tony, I just want to strengthen your point, because what you really talked about with Mark Cuban was that's the culture. That's culture.
Yep.
So just like we talk about, when you're creating that culture, when you have that dynamic culture, like that, where everyone really is loving coming to work and they do great things together and they really
Yep.
feel like they have all those six principles. They encompass all those six principles
Yep.
beautifully. People talk. Other people in the industry, they
Yep.
want in on your culture.
Right.
We have a client who they almost lost one of their best team members because they were just getting frustrated. And after doing some work with us, and then they hired a dream manager. So then they had somebody that was like a dream manager for their team. And this woman actually came into her office a couple of months after starting the dream manager and said, I just want to let you know, I was out the door. I was about to leave.
Wow.
And then this person said, but you guys really care about me. I can't believe that, like, I get to do this every month, and I get
Yep.
to, like, you guys really want to help me achieve my goals. And so this person talked so much about the company and how much she loved it and how she's so glad that she stayed. And it was perfect timing because she almost left. And she brought in one of their next great hires
Wow.
because one of her friends was like, wait, I want in on this. I want a dream manager, and
Yep.
you love going to work, and this person did not love going to work. And
Right.
so it's really about creating that culture. I mean, we get to work with so many companies where they are in their industry, they are known for having a great culture. People are knocking on their door trying to get hired by them.
Yep.
Like, that's when you know you've got this great culture, and that's when you know that you're being talked about. And if you have people knocking on your door saying, "Hey, I want to work with you," some of those people, it really might be a great fit.
Yep. And
So,
yep. And to definitely, and yeah, that's just to segue right into that. And before I do that, I mentioned 10 people that you could also do that internally and go to your top 10 people in your company, no matter what they do. Most of the time, I think this is fairly consistent. I could be wrong, but most of the time, people who really crush what's in front of them, they hang out with people who crush what's in front of them.
absolutely.
Most of the time. The inverse is true too. I mean, so you, you don't take the reference from the person you don't think is it, but I think most of the time those birds of a feather kind of flock together. And so one person knows another person, or at least they'll be thoughtful about giving you that answer. So an internal or external network. Now, another way, as you said, talking to people internally is I'm interested in some sort of incentive or program of internal references. So in the chat, I'm just curious if anybody at their company if there's a program set up that you're incentivized to bring good people into the company, particularly if there's a job opening. We're seeing that more and more where people can get a bonus for bringing a really good person to the company. And so if you have that, put that in the chat. I'd be curious. And just for, it doesn't have to be, and I've seen it all over the place. One company, it's $1,000 if they hire the person that you bring to them.
Mhm.
Which is, and it's based on the position, obviously. But what they do, which I thought is interesting, is that bonus is also there's additional bonuses you can gain from longevity and productivity. So if I bring someone into my company and they last and they do well and they're in their job for whatever it is, 9 months, a year, whatever, I get a bonus too. And I heard the manager saying, what happens then is when that guy goes, and this was in the warehouse industry, tough place to hire. He said, what happens now is that when they're having lunch or something, and it's like at month 8, and you go to your friend, hey, how's it working out? And he's going, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to stay here. The guy says, you are staying here. You're staying here at least 4 more months because I got $600, right? So they force people. And also with productivity, you bring a salesperson in and they hit their quota, you get a piece of that also. So there's some ways to do that. They have to be there. Somebody just said, yeah, they have to be there 6 months. And so I think longevity is good. And then also productivity. So there are definitely ways that people bring that can bring good people into the company, and they understand the culture. They
Yeah.
understand those things that you do there. So it's a great strategy.
Or
So
you can do the opposite of that, which is give people $1,000 to leave, like, Zappos does.
yes, yeah, that is interesting from the interview process. Zappos, and I was just reading about another company that when they're ready to, we'll talk about selling here in a minute, but when they're ready to hire somebody, they say, we really like you to be at this company. And so, but we're going to give you $1,000 today to drop out and not take this position. You know,
It might actually be more. It might actually be 2,000 now.
yeah, that's what Zappos is. This was, I think you're right. Yep,
2,000
two
for
grand.
Zappos.
Walk away right now.
And they said that plenty of people take it, and they're so happy that they do, because
Yep.
they just
Yeah, and people might go $2,000, but when you think of a bad hire costing 15 times that salary,
yep,
that's not a big investment. It's actually
not at
it's an
all. They saved
insurance
so much
policy. Yep.
money. Take it and run. Go
Yep.
for it.
So let's move just a little bit here because a couple questions. Somebody was agreeing with you, Kate, that soft skills are so important, and um, how do you even find out about soft skills, with people? So let's talk. Let's frame the interview process from the book real quick, and then talk about some red flags. Does that make sense? We can go from there. Is that a
That
plan?
makes sense.
Okay. So,
I'm just along for this hiring
oh, okay.
ride,
Yes.
Tony.
So let's say we've got our role description set up and we've done some sourcing and we're ready to interview. Well, as we said before, the process of someone doing some screening interviews, those are by phone and those are hit the gong early interviews. You're committing maybe a 30-minute conversation, but if you get to a point, that's what's great about doing it by phone. If you get to a point where it's just not a fit, you can disengage right away and move on. So you're doing those screening interviews, and those screening interviews will bring in the candidates that you then want to go through the next steps of interviewing. Now, it is interesting. I was talking to an HR person and another hiring person. They by necessity did their second round, which I'm going to talk about now, of interviews via Zoom, where normally they would have had the person on site. And they were talking about the pros and cons of that. And actually, they were excited about it because they said they actually found out a few things that they couldn't quite get in the screening interview. But at the same time, they would have had the person on site before. And so those screening interviews are important. You're asking the person about what they've done, what their skills, some simple questions, and then deciding if it's a fit, because there's nothing worse than bringing a candidate on, you're 15 minutes in and you're and I got eight other people talking to it today. So anyway, so the screening interview, then you decide those group of folks who could be A players that you're going to bring in. And the first set of interviews, as we talked about, as we talked about before, that there you're asking, what have you done, and what were you hired to do at your other positions? How did it go? What did you accomplish what you're hired to? And then you listen. You're talking about competency, and you're trying to find, have they done it before? Have they done what we're going to ask them to do before? And you're listening and you're marking on that scorecard that they've done what you're asking that position to do on your scorecard. And so that would be that position. That if someone, then your next round, because there is some technical proficiency, then you're going to deep dive interview where you're going to bring in some people from a particular department from in your company they're going to be working closely for, and those are the people that can kind of cut through the BS. They're gonna ask some specific questions. If it's a coder, then about coding. If it's working with particular software, if it's about whatever it might be, dealing and getting contracts done, whatever it might be, those people are going to talk nuts and bolts and find out if the person asks questions and listen. And they're going to find out if the person really, from a competency standpoint, knows what they're talking about. Then at that point, and what's nice about this is you can bring in a whole different set of people and start to have your culture interviews, where that can be a lunch. There's a bunch of different ways to do that, but that culture interview is where the people are asking some questions that really get to the heart of, will this person be a fit culturally at our company? And so those interviews all go down, and they're keeping those typically, although they can be scorecarded because you have those, but those may be the person remembers, writes things down afterwards, but whatever that is, then they have to then they're going to be back, and you're all going to come together after those interviews and discuss the scorecard with the person and pick out those people who you think can be A players. If you don't have any, start the process over. Then you're going to get to the references and you're going to do the reference checks, come back together, decide, is this do we have an A player? If we have multiple A players, let's rank them. If we have one A player, let's offer them a job. If I have no A players, we start the process again. So that's pretty much the process that's outlined in the book. And as you said, we take people through that. And really what a big thing we do with folks is help ask them questions so that they can ask the right questions, get them down to,
Yeah.
to what is so important. So that's the process. And so
One of the
with
things
that, go ahead, Kate.
one of the things that's important to remember with this process, because we're talking about a lot of different interviews and bringing in all these different people and everything. One thing to be really clear about too is when you have multiple people interviewing the same person, making sure that everyone that's going to be interviewing knows, what questions are you asking?
Yep.
What questions am I asking? What is the purpose of my interview questions? Like,
Yep.
otherwise what typically happens is the new person comes in to meet the person. So tell me about yourself. Oh, what's your background?
You're
Like
right.
there's
Yep.
there's so
Yep.
much that doesn't need to be talked about. So however you can put those interviews together so that the person
100%.
has what they need to know about
That's a great
that
point.
first interview, so that going into the second one, not only is it good for you because you don't want to waste your time, but it also unconsciously probably makes the interviewee understand, oh, they're on their game. They know what
Yep.
they're doing. Otherwise, because they probably get frustrated too, like, why am I answering the same questions
Yep.
for this
Yep.
person and that person? So that's just something to be really clear
I
on
would be an oak tree. I've told you 3 times. I would be an oak tree if I was a tree. Good.
right? So
Good.
it's like we've got to make sure that everyone is on the same
Right.
page and we
Yep.
know.
Couple good questions that were up there just real quick about that screening interview without getting into any details. Basically, you're asking the person, so, tell me about your career goals. What are you really good at professionally? Give me some examples. What are you not good at or not interested in? Which can be an interesting question, and give me some examples there. And then finally, can you tell me the names of your last, pick the number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bosses, and how will they rate your performance between 1 and 10 when I talk to them? And we talked about before in a screening interview, if you tell somebody they're going to contact their former bosses and, their phone goes dead, that's a problem. All right. So when I talk to them, what would your former boss say? That's all you're looking for. And this isn't, either when you're done with that screening interview, you have to say, this could be the person, this might be the person, or you don't invite them. Somebody is not going to certainly people can make a better impression, but if you're just asking those questions about what they did, evaluate that. That's how you decide if you're going to bring someone in. Not that I thought they were this, they were quiet in the interview, those sorts of things. Find out what they've done. If it makes sense, then bring. You should, I don't know, there's different theories on this, but kind of a prevailing number is, only about 10 to 20% of your candidates should get through the screening process.
Mhm.
So if you're really listening well. And then that other question that came up is, look, if I'm trying to change the corporate culture, why would I ask the people who are making our culture suck if they could bring in some other people who are probably just like them? It's a very valid point, as we were talking about. So that may not be the strategy. Now, not all these are exactly tailored for you. I would say if you go to the people who you think are capable of helping transform your culture and ask them, then you would do that. Maybe you don't bonus it. But also, remember, if just because someone gives you a referral, you don't have to hire that person. And that's what's great about hiring with discipline. It's okay to ask those people because the inverse could be true. Maybe maybe the person that refers somebody is like the bottom of the food chain of the people they hang around with. So and so they've recommended somebody who's orders of magnitude better than them. Your hiring process will take you through that if you trust it. So you can definitely use it, but just have a good hiring process. If you're going to use the bonus system, you don't owe your employees to hire that person, but at the same time, it is another source for that.
And I think what's also important too is making sure your team understands why you have that system in place. It's not so that they can make $1,000,
Right.
right? Like we have to really be clear that culture is the most important thing. If again, it always comes back to this, right?
Yep.
If you're making culture a priority, if everyone really understands that, if you have a culture with culture advocates, they know that one person can create havoc on your culture. So they don't want that. They're not going to
Yep.
want that. They probably have a bunch of friends that they would never want to bring to the organization because they know it wouldn't be a good fit. So
Right.
we've got to make sure people understand the reason why, because if they understand the reason why you want to give this kind of bonus, and that's going to kind of make them think twice about who they're really bringing in.
Sure.
You want everyone to feel protective of the culture of the organization.
Right.
Everyone needs to feel
Yep.
like, wow, every new person that we bring in is going to affect our culture slightly because we're
Absolutely.
bringing in a new
Yep.
personality. That's why the cultural fit conversation is so important.
Yep.
And I remember listening to Howard Schultz, and he was talking about hiring for Starbucks. And with the culture conversations, like, he would bring in someone, and as you can imagine, like, some people were probably a little intimidated by sitting across the table from Howard, and, Howard, my friend Howard,
Yeah, Howie.
Howard. And he's like, one of the first things he does is he's like, "All right, look, you're nervous. I get it. It's an interview. Just like take a couple deep breaths. I just want to have a conversation with you." It's like you just have to get down to the core of like who that person is, because
Yep.
that's really like
Yep.
that's the cultural fit. That's when you're really going to understand, who is this person? What are their values? That's why having very core strong values for the company, what are they? We've got to know what they are in order for us to be able to ask the right questions so that we know we're bringing in a good cultural fit. Because if
Absolutely.
somebody's
Yeah.
cultural, if someone has values of like fun, one of my girlfriends, she started a company. She built
Mhm.
it. It was a $300,000 company, and at one point, and within 3 years it turned into a $10 million company.
Wow.
She literally started the company saying, "I want to have a ton of fun creating value into the world. Who's in?" She didn't even know exactly what they were going to do, but fun is the core of their value. So,
Yep.
like, they need to bring people that value
Absolutely.
fun in an
Yep. Yep,
organization.
that's true. No, and that's actually a point in selling. Near the end, we'll talk about is that the job can be appealing for the fun, and that can look different. Like for some people, an engineer's like, oh, I love to do these. That's fun. Just let me alone with my spreadsheet and okay, well, that's their idea of fun. So, and I think people will also strive to protect their own reputation. I mean, I've gotten to a point now, if from being burned a couple of times, if someone asks me for a job reference, I said, well, you can certainly put me down for a reference, but if they're asking me to contact someone, my question is always, if you are offered this job, will you take it? And if they're not going to
Mm.
take it, I don't call anybody to recommend, because I don't want to recommend somebody. They're good. They go through the time. I speak up for them. And then they're either, for whatever reason, they're not going to take that job. So I've been burned a couple of times that way, because I think people will protect their reputations also. So yeah, so the process is so important. And how do you get to that idea of asking the right questions? Well, what if you did this? What if you said, I'm going to make culture a priority at my company? And then I'm going to define what our mission is, or I'm going to help define what our mission is. And that's going to lead all our decisions. And we're going to have a great strategy to get there. Now, if I took those 3 steps, I naturally, out of that comes those questions. So, of course, I'm speaking to the interconnectivity of all the 6 principles in here. What questions do I ask during interview? Well, if you're doing all these principles, they come out. What are the questions? Well, look at your strategic plan. That's how you create your scorecard. Who do I need to have that's going to help us do what's in this strategic plan? And how do I know it's a cultural fit? Well, let me go back to my mission. What are we trying to accomplish? What's important culturally for us to accomplish that mission? So everything's connected here, and it falls in. Hiring doesn't exist by itself. And again, back to the interconnectivity of those steps. So I'm curious now, because now we're in the interview, and what about some red flags? So just as we talk about these, I'm on the side. If anybody out there's got a great red flag story about someone in an interview, type it in, and I will mention it, because we've all got some kind of war stories there. But what are some red flags? Well, I'm just going to list a few of them, and we can talk about them. And Kate, if you've got experience with this, but these are just a few. So I think a red flag is the person who's had no past failures. They've when talking about things, they've done everything right and they've never had a failure. Um, that's a red flag to me. I want someone who tells me I was supposed to, this is what happened. I could have done this better. They take ownership for it. So one red flag is the person who has had no past failures. Um,
Mm.
that's somebody who hasn't done much, or is a liar or something. I'm not sure what's going on there, but that's
Oh,
interesting.
you mean if your biggest weekness is that
Okay,
you care
you know,
too
I
much,
care too
you're
much. I
too
work too
organized?
hard. I care too much. Okay, yes. Thank you, Michael Scott. Okay, darn it, I just care too much.
Oh my gosh, I'm just such a perfectionist. I'm a
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the other
workaholic.
thing. I'm such a perfectionist. Yeah, which leads into another red flag is a person that exaggerates. Obviously, when you're talking about things that you've done, the person that exaggerates or takes too much credit. We've talked about,
Mhm.
when you're talking this comes up in a lot when getting big clients, and were you the person that actually landed the deal, or were you the person that typed up the deal and emailed it and somebody else
Yeah.
signed it? So and plus you want people who I think um typically will kind of defer some of the credit. The person who's always looking for the credit, I think that says something that
Yeah.
I was asked to be on a committee to hire somebody. I won't say where, but we got done with the one person and I said, I think this is a good candidate. I just wish the person didn't answer every question with their resume. Well, how would you do this? Well, I did this, this, and this, and this, and this, and they go through and you're like, oh my gosh, okay. Is there anything you haven't done and haven't done well and that you did by yourself? So that's important. Another thing is this is where you really have to listen. Somebody that speaks poorly of past bosses, to me, I think
Mhm.
that's a huge red flag because all you're really saying is, okay, so if I hire you, I'm just getting in line because I'm going to be next. And we used to, when I was running a school, we'd have family interviews before we admitted someone, and it amazed me someone coming in who would just bash the administration of the school they were coming from. And I just wanted to say, why would I why do I think this is a good fit when I know you're going to be in somebody else's office in 2 years, talking about me? So you have to be very careful. The flip side of that is I was actually doing an interview with someone and I knew that this person got just the royal shaft from this other company. They really did. And I didn't think much of the people who had done it, but this person was so gracious in the way they handled it. I'm like, that is a mature person. And so, how do they handle maybe not getting treated well or, so I think that's
Yeah.
important as,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
a
Huh?
couple things too is just when you're asking questions and you're asking for specific examples, which really you should be asking for the examples of how they accomplished the
Right.
work that they were supposed to do. And the person can't name a specific example. Like they're just kind of describing things that sound good.
Yep.
There's not really a great, like, specific thing that they've done. Like, we love to hear from people, "What was the challenge? How did you overcome it? What did you do?"
Right.
Giving people an actual scenario, and then they can tell you what they would do, that's fine. But what did you do in this
Exactly.
situation
Yep.
so that you understand, like, how they process information? That's
Absolutely.
gonna give you a lot of insight. And then a lot of the times the questions too come back to, again, going back to the your core values, like we've talked about in the past. For Floyd, we hire people who are committed, coachable, and aware. So there's questions that we can ask people to understand, like, how aware are they?
Yep.
By asking them like what they learned from certain situations, asking them, I mean, just on a commitment side, like how committed they are to different projects. So we want to make sure that, like, for us, we're asking questions where we really understand, wow, is this person really coachable? And that kind of goes back to your point, Tony, where they might kind of be blaming everyone else. I'm
Yep.
amazing. It didn't work because of all these people.
Correct. Yep.
Probably not very coachable.
Right. And you're right. You don't even have to answer. Sometimes you don't have to ask the questions. The people are, if you're listening for it, that's exactly right. That's a great point, Kate. And, um, uh, you know, not, not being able to explain past job moves, is important.
Yeah.
But even before then, just somebody that speaks in English. I mean, the language English. I mean, like, specifically. So the person says, well, I brought together a group of thought leaders so that we could synergetically put a dent in the universe. Like, what are you talking about? Okay. Is there, what did you do? Did you sell something? Did you? So that can, that can be important. The jargon. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, there are times and I know in coaching sometimes, particularly coaching, maybe I'll say to some younger people and you, I mean, I have to say, what does that mean? And then what and sometimes they know and explain it to me, which is great, but other times they can't explain it. It's like, what exactly are you talking about? All right. I don't know what putting it on the runway and doing, I don't know what all that means, all right, but what did you actually do? All right. And so that can be important. I think, one of the questions is, when you're talking, if people have the right kind of past, what are the right kind of past
I was
failures?
just gonna ask that. Yes,
Well,
Jeremy, that's a great
well,
question.
yes, hopefully no limbs were lost. That would be like the first one. But I mean, I think you can know someone who took a chance, it didn't work out. Something, how responsible we were there. I don't know. You have any thoughts on that, Kate?
Well, it kind of reminds me of the story, and I don't know where I got this from. So whether it's a book or a show, or I don't know. So maybe someone can fill it in. But it was this financial advisor, and he ended up making a huge mistake that cost the company like over $1 million, right? Like horrible mistake.
Yep.
And the guy came in and he's thinking he's going to get fired, obviously, because he just made this huge mistake. And the guy's like, and he comes in and he kind of yells at him and he's like asks him like, what happened, what'd you do? And like he's like, I would never do this, is what I did wrong, like, that whole, they have this whole conversation. And he's like, all right, get back to work. And he's like, I'm not gonna get fired. He's like, are you kidding me? I just That was like $1 million training I just gave you. I'm not losing this person. So
Absolutely.
I think when
Paid
it comes to
tuition.
failures, asking questions of the person to understand, do you understand what that
Right.
past failure was, and
Yep.
how did you correct it? Like, how did you correct it? How did you handle it? And what did you learn?
Right.
And what things did you put in place to ensure that those types of things do
Yeah.
not happen anymore? That gives you insight of how this person processes the things that happen to them.
Yep.
And if you believe that, because look, the bottom line is people are going to make mistakes,
Right.
right? So if we can hire people where we feel that they are competent in their role and they're going to do the right thing, even if they had made a mistake, that to me is
Yep.
like the right kind of
Sure.
failure.
And do they own it? Do they take
Exactly.
ownership for it, which is
Ownership,
huge. So,
extreme
um,
ownership.
yes, exactly. Now, one of the things though also important is, um, if this person's going to manage, have they hired people before? That's one way that you can create this really disciplined, rigorous situation. If you hire people who can hire good people, we work with some scorecards with folks where that's part of that's one of the objectives for the person in the position, that they hire 3 A players in their department in the next 3 years. Have they hired before? If that person's going to be hiring people, you want to make sure that they have either a track record or you feel like they can get up to speed on what it's like to hire people. But definitely, have they had a track record of hiring people? And then quickly, just the last couple, it got mentioned up here. Someone that's too interested in compensation, I think, can be a red flag. Right now people can do their research, but if compensation's the leading factor, you're going to get there. But if that's the leading factor, that can be a red flag. Um, that's their driver on I need to make this much, and that's a fact, but it shouldn't be a driver if they're too interested in that. Obviously, if somebody paints themselves as an expert or they're just too self-assured, I think that's problematic. Again, humility is a part of that. The virtue of humility, that someone, if I know someone's great and they're humble and you're talking to them, my esteem of that person just goes up, rather than the person that's, a B player who thinks they're A plus. And then I would say lastly, the person who has too much of a need to be me. Well, I'm just disorganized. That's me. Or that's me. Understanding your weakness is important, but the idea of that's who I am, that can be a red flag. So those are some potential red flags that can come up in hiring. I'm sure everybody's got their stories, but definitely those are some things to look for in there. So we're getting close to out of time, but let's say, for example, that someone makes it through the process. And I was hope we kind of finish on this. So someone makes it through the process, but hold on. I'm sorry. I got one more thing before that. Someone asked about cultural interviews. Here's a couple examples of cultural interviews. So, for example, everybody knows Dave Ramsey and Financial Peace and the organization. They have an 11-step process in their hiring. Now, one of the things that's integral to what they do and is they help people develop a budget and live within a budget, and the idea of budgeting and taking care of your money. So I think it's like step 8. After they discuss compensation, the person comes back and they tell the person, okay, here's what you will make at this job. Now, we're going to meet next week, and we would like you to show us a budget with that number plugged in. So the actually employee has to say, this is how I would budget X amount of money that you're going to pay me. So, and some people think that's intrusive, but I mean, that's core to what they do.
Mhm.
And particularly someplace like that, I think you also run the risk of saying, look, I don't care what this pays. I just want to work for Dave Ramsey. Well, that person, that's going to be a problem sooner or later, because the person's going to have family issues and financial issues that are going to affect the way they do it. So I thought that was really interesting. Whatever the industry is, whatever the value is at the company, can the person demonstrate that that's intrinsic to who they are? I think we even talk about with dream managers that part of the agreement is you're living what you're helping and you're coaching people through. Not
Mhm.
perfectly, but you embrace those ideas. So that's one way of the culture interview. And I heard one more quick story that both volunteering was a huge part of what this company wanted their people to be involved in, giving back to people. So my suggestion, and the CEO actually did it, was with this person saying, look, I'm going to do this on Saturday. It was, I don't know, soup kitchen, something like that. Why don't you come down with me and we'll do that? And so the person had to come down, and he got to see how comfortable this person was serving others. Now, that person was never going to serve meals in their role as an executive position, but he got to see how comfortable the person was serving others. If you want something, and I was reading this, if you want someone who needs to be a great coach on the team and in your organization, one thing would say, look, I coach my kid's soccer team. Why don't you come on Saturday and help me coach these 8-year-olds? You're going to find out if the person can get to the heart of what coaching is and coaching other people. So there's a lot of inventive ways that you can get the culture questions asked with someone that may be a little bit non-traditional. So back to my thought. So now we've been through the interview. The person, you've got them, they're an A player. We're gonna offer this person. Now is the time, not during the interview, but now is the time that you start to sell your organization on the person. Now, if your person, the person you're choosing to offer the job with, if you don't think you have to sell them on the company, you probably haven't stretched high enough. I mean, you should have to sell the person to come there, I think. Does that make sense? I mean, the person's an A player. They probably have other options. You should want to sell the person on why they want to work there. So I am curious, in the chat box, if you could say, give one thing to a potential person you're offering a job with to sell them, what about your company would you offer? What's the selling point of your company? Go ahead and type that in, and I'll talk about just a few as we go through here. So I've heard that you can, like, there's 5 F's that you can go through, the letter F with people. The first one is fit. Show that the person really fits into the organization, either by mission or that their talent. A players want to be around A players. They don't want to be around people that are lagging behind. And so they want to be around other great people. So if the person's great at what they do, maybe the fit is they're going to be around other great people, or the mission is so important that it fits in with them. So fit is one. And the mission, as we said, the fit. Family, what does this job do for the person's family or in their situation? There are folks that, they want to talk to the person's family to make sure that the family's on board for the job also. If it's going to take a lot of time, is that okay with their family? That can be an important question. Get everybody on board so someone's not taking a job and they're going to be fighting and have this dysfunction at home that they're going to bring to work. Freedom can be important, for a lot of A players. Tell me what to do, get out of my way. So you have a lot of freedom here. Here's what to get done. When I was hiring teachers, that some great teachers just say, what do I need to teach? Where's my classroom? I'll get it done. Those are the people that I valued, at least. But freedom can be a real incentive for people. We don't micromanage here. Okay, that may be important. Obviously, fortune. We talked about compensation. The reality is you don't want to underpay someone, but you don't want to pay too much. So finding that sweet spot, what's the, it has to be good for them there. And then as you said, Kate, the final F is fun. That the person can have fun and we spend a lot of time at our jobs. And if you can't have fun doing that, now fun looks different to other people. As I said, it might be that, man, my if I had a week where I cranked out 18 spreadsheets, whew, that's fun. If that's what the job is, you want people who think that that's fun. So anyway, fit, family, freedom, fortune, and fun can be ways that you're selling the person on the role. So,
And I think a part of that too is like by the time you get that far into it, they probably want to be there. There's something about if they've gotten that far into the interview and you've
right.
realized that you still want to talk to them, they've probably sold you that they know about your organization. They believe in the mission. They believe in the values. They believe in what you do. Like, I mean, by the time you get to this point, yes, you need to kind of sell them on like, hopefully they have the questions. Like that is one red flag that I feel like in an interview, if people aren't asking questions at the end, like what questions do you have about this role? What questions do you have about our organization? That's a red flag because they should definitely have questions. Even people that have done so much research on you and they know the answer to the questions, they probably
Yes.
are asking you just because they know they should be asking you that.
Absolutely.
Um, but I think that's just something that by the time they get there, I feel like they should really have a good idea of who
Yep.
you are as an organization, how you manage, how you work. And if they've had an opportunity to meet some of those other people on the team, all this stuff has probably come up,
Right.
or most of it.
Yep. And so the idea that selling is that, and I know I'm going to hear it. We have some folks in nonprofits that, well, we just don't pay enough. You got to find where the selling point is for the organization. If you can only pay so much, what are the other F's are important to that person when you sell them for that? So hopefully you'll be in a position, if you hire with rigorous discipline, that you want that person so bad that you have to work to sell to get them there. And that's the person you want to hire. If you don't feel that way, don't offer the position. Go back, keep searching, do whatever you have to do to fill that role internally until you find the right person, because it's all about the people. It's all about who you have on that bus. People are going to be your culture. So once you have a mission and strategy, you've got to have people and you got to have the right people. So I think
Absolutely.
that horse is
All
dead
right.
now.
Drop Tony's mic drop the
Yes.
mic. And just in time, we are
Yes.
1 minute to
1
1
minute.
o'clock. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Please put in the chat, what is the one takeaway that you got out of today's session? We want to hear the one takeaway that you got out of today's session. And also, just want to let you know we're going to take a little bit of a break from our culture solution conversation. So we will not be back here next Wednesday. But we're working on some other stuff, so we'll definitely keep you informed on what we have going on. But in the meantime, as we always say, we would love to continue our conversations with you one-on-one. So
Absolutely.
if you have not yet done so, please hit that button. I think Tony can put it up so that you can schedule a call with us. We want to talk to you. We want to hear about your organization. We want to hear about the challenges that you're going through and how we might be able to help you. So please give us a call. There's no hard sell. We really just want to talk to you and see if it's a good fit to continue a conversation with you and how we might be able to work with you. Again, our mission is to grow people. We get to do that every day with organizations through our coaching experiences, through our training. If you have any upcoming events, I know not everyone's congregating back together again, but we do also do a lot of speaking engagements and we're looking into some of those virtual type events and stuff too. So give us a call. We'll have a
Absolutely.
chat.
Awesome. We'll have a culture conversation.
We'll have a culture conversation one-on-one. Well, thank you guys so much. It's been really fun getting together with you every week, and we will keep you posted for upcoming things. And Tony, it's always fun chatting with
Always a
you,
pleasure. Yep. I look forward to
especially
Wednesdays.
around number 4, hiring. Getting riled up.
Yeah. You'll
All
rile
right,
up. So
guys.
calm down now. All right.
We
Bye
will
now.
talk to you soon.